I used to think the worst thing in life was being hated, but no. Worse is being neglected, ignored, as if you never existed. You can live in the same house, share the same blood with someone, and still be nothing more than a faint shadow to them. I know that because I've lived that way for the past 30 years. I'm Elizabeth, 30 years old, the second child in the family, or more accurately, the child nobody cares about. In contrast, my older sister, Lauren, was the center of attention, the precious gem of my parents. Lauren was beautiful, talented, charming, at least in their eyes. I was just an ordinary, quiet girl with nothing special, and that meant I was always left out. Since childhood, the favoritism in my family wasn't subtle or hard to spot. It was blatant, obvious, so blatant that I sometimes questioned whether I was even their biological child. When Lauren had a grand birthday party at a fancy hotel with hundreds of guests, I got a last-minute grocery store cake. When she got an A, the whole family celebrated. When I got an A, just a half-hearted nod, before they quickly shifted the conversation to Lauren's latest achievement. We grew up in a wealthy suburb of Dallas, Texas. My family owned a fairly successful chain of traditional restaurants, and my parents were always proud of that. But their greatest pride wasn't the business, it was Lauren. When she went to college, they paid all her tuition, bought her a luxury apartment downtown, funded all her trips, and sent her a steady allowance. She never had to worry about anything except enjoying life. I was different. I knew that if I wanted a good future, I had to take care of it myself. When I got into college, I didn't receive a single penny from them. Tuition, I took out loans. Housing, I rented a cheap apartment with roommates. To survive those college years, I worked every job I could, waitressing, library assistant, even delivering at night for a while. And even when I graduated with honors in computer science, they didn't bother showing up to my graduation ceremony. Back then, I told myself maybe they just hadn't noticed what I'd done. Maybe I just needed to try harder, be better, be more successful, and then they'd look at me differently. But I was wrong. I could climb to any height, and in their eyes, Lauren would still be the only shining star in this family. Years later, even after I had a stable job at a tech company, I kept wondering, should I try harder? What can I do to make them proud? But then I realized some people will never see you, no matter how hard you try. I accepted that, or at least I thought I had, until the one time I asked them for help, and that was also the last time I was ever part of this family. There's a saying, don't expect help from those who are used to looking down on you. I should have etched that into my heart. But at that time, I was still foolish enough to believe that just this once they would treat me fairly. I had been working in tech for almost 6 years. The job was good, the salary decent, but I knew I could do more. An MBA from a top-tier school would take me further. I could get promoted, build my own career, finally step out of the shadow of my family. But there was one problem: tuition. The MBA program I aimed for cost $130,000. With the money I had saved over the years, I was still short by quite a bit. I didn't expect my parents to pay it all like they did for Lauren. I just needed some help, or at least their co-signature on a loan, so I wouldn't drown in debt. I prepared thoroughly. I laid out a clear plan, why this MBA mattered, how it would benefit my future, and why it was a worthy investment. I thought that if I presented it as a practical opportunity, they might see it differently. I was wrong. That evening, I sat with my parents at the dinner table, waiting for the right moment to bring it up. As soon as I started speaking, my mother barely listened, just focused on cutting her steak into small pieces. My father crossed his arms, his expression cold. But I kept going, clinging to the last bits of hope. Finally, I ended with a careful sentence. I just need you to co-sign the loan. I'll take full responsibility for repaying it. Just like you invested in Lauren, I want a chance for myself. Silence. Then my father laughed, a bitter, mocking laugh. Invest in you? He put his fork down, eyes narrowing. Elizabeth, you have to understand. We invested in Lauren because she's the future of this family. She studied business. She'll help run the restaurant chain. But you? My mother shook her head and added, your MBA is just for yourself, right? You're not planning to come back and help with the restaurant? I felt a chill run down my spine. I had placed my hope in the wrong place. So, I don't deserve support? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My father simply said, "We've spent too much on Lauren already. Now it's time we start thinking about our own future." I held my breath. "Are you sure? This is a lot of money." Aunt Margaret laughed, a warm laugh, so different from my father's mocking one. "I'm investing in you, Elizabeth, because I know you're going to do something great. For the first time in my life, someone truly believed in me. But I also knew one thing. If my parents ever found out about this, they would never forgive me. I would keep this secret until the end. I just didn't know this secret would be betrayed in the worst possible way. There are moments in life you never forget. Moments when your whole world collapses before your eyes, when you realize the ones you love most can become your cruelest enemies. That night, I came home feeling lighter than I had in years. After so many years of trying on my own, someone finally believed in me. Someone was willing to invest in my future. Aunt Margaret had given me a chance, a ticket out of the darkness I'd always been trapped in. I didn't need anything more. But I made a mistake. I wasn't careful with my secret. The next day, I left the house early for work. Lauren was still asleep as usual, enjoying the life our parents had built for her. I didn't think much about my laptop, didn't think anyone would be curious enough to go through it, but I forgot one thing. Lauren couldn't stand anyone outshining her. I don't know how she did it. Maybe she accidentally saw an email notification on the screen, or maybe she snooped on purpose while I wasn't home. But that evening, when I walked in the door, I could feel the change in the air immediately. Everything was too quiet, not a single sound. And then I saw it. All my belongings packed into cardboard boxes, neatly stacked in the middle of the living room. Lauren stood beside them, arms crossed, face smug. My parents sat on the sofa, their eyes burning into me. "What's going on?" I asked, a sense of dread rising in my chest. My father threw a stack of papers toward me, a bunch of printed emails. I bent down, picked them up, read each line, and nearly went numb. I was being accused of betraying the family. Their future, not mine. I didn't say another word. I knew that if I kept pleading, they would only see me as more of a burden. Anger burned inside me, but I swallowed it, keeping my face calm. I would take care of myself, just like I always had. I didn't have many people I could rely on, but I knew there was one person who would listen to me, Aunt Margaret. Aunt Margaret is my father's sister. If my father is a traditional patriarchal man who clings to old values, then Aunt Margaret is the woman who broke every boundary. She's a renowned neurosurgeon with a wildly successful career. I had never seen my father show her any respect, only jealousy and resentment. They never said it out loud, but I could feel it. At family gatherings, my parents always avoided talking about her success. They never praised her the way they praised Lauren. If anyone mentioned Aunt Margaret, my father would just force a tight-lipped smile and quickly change the subject. But to me, Aunt Margaret was an inspiration. I called her one Sunday afternoon. When I told her my parents had refused to help me, she sighed, but her tone wasn't surprised. "Elizabeth, you should have called me from the start." "Aunt?" I hesitated. "Can you help me?" "Without hesitation," she replied. "Of course. I'll cover your tuition." Those emails looked like they were sent from me to Aunt Margaret, containing the restaurant's recipes, supplier lists, and critical financial information. They looked so real, my stomach twisted. I looked up, facing my father's cold stare. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" I shook my head, feeling like I was falling off a cliff. They're not real. I never sent them." My mother burst into tears, her voice trembling. "Then what is there to explain? You took Margaret's money to sell out this family?" "I didn't do it," I shouted, desperate. "Someone forged those emails. I don't even have access to that kind of information. Only Lauren." "Oh, so now you're blaming me?" Lauren cut me off, her tone dramatic. "I read every one of your emails, Elizabeth. I can't believe you would do this. I tried to protect you, but you destroyed yourself." My mouth fell open, horrified. Lauren had set the whole thing up. She had gone through my computer, altered the emails, and presented them in a way that made me look like a complete traitor. "It's all lies," I yelled, but no one listened. Because they didn't want to listen. My father clenched his fists, his voice like ice. You've brought shame to this family. You're no longer a part of it. Pack your things and go. My mother looked up, eyes full of tears, but she said nothing to defend me. Lauren just stood there, eyes gleaming with pride. She had won. I stood frozen, feeling like someone had drained every bit of strength from me. Why? Just because I dared to have a path of my own? Just because I dared to break free from the chains my parents put on me? I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just stayed silent, stepped forward, and picked up my boxes. As I opened the door, I heard Lauren's soft, mocking laugh behind me. Goodbye, Elizabeth. I hope you learned your lesson. I turned back, looked her straight in the eye, and said in a low, sharp voice like a blade, "You'll regret this." Then I stepped out of the house I once called home. I never went back. I walked away from that house with nothing but a few boxes and a broken heart. My breath was heavy in the night air. The street lights flickered on the familiar street, but I felt like a stranger in the very place I grew up. Lauren had won. My whole life I had tried to prove my worth to my parents, but in the end they believed her without a second thought. With just a few fake papers, I became the traitor. With nothing left to lose, I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling as I dialed the only number I could rely on now. Margaret picked up after the second ring. "Elizabeth?" Her voice was full of concern. I couldn't hold it in anymore. My whole body shook. I had tried to be strong, but the moment I heard her voice, the tears came pouring out. "Auntie," I choked out. "They kicked me out." She didn't ask questions. She didn't need an explanation. She just said, firmly, "Come here right now. My door is always open." I moved in with Aunt Margaret that very day. She wasn't just the only family member who stood by me. She was the anchor that helped pull me back up. "Hold your head high, Elizabeth," she said to me the next morning. "You haven't lost everything. You've just begun." And she was right. I threw myself into my studies with everything I had. I had nothing left to lose, no ties to go back to. I had only one path ahead: success. The first days of the MBA program weren't easy. I came to class with a heavy heart, carrying the wounds of betrayal from my family. But I quickly realized that no one cared where I came from or who had abandoned me. Here, there was only one thing that mattered: my ability. I threw myself into every lecture, every project, every discussion. I worked myself to exhaustion, but I didn't allow myself to stop. I couldn't afford to fail, because if I failed, they would win. I turned my pain into power. Every time I remembered Lauren's condescending stare, I pushed myself further. Every time the image of my parents kicking me out flashed in my mind, I reminded myself I had to prove them wrong. Day by day, I grew stronger. I was no longer the weak Elizabeth who used to long for her parents' praise. I didn't need their validation anymore. And when the 2 years came to an end, I stood on the graduation stage, honored as the top student in the class. I looked out at the audience where Aunt Margaret was sitting, the only family I had. She clapped, eyes full of pride. For the first time in my life, I felt truly worthy. After graduation, I quickly received an offer from one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the US, an opportunity no one could refuse. I moved to New York and started a new chapter in my life. 3 years passed. 3 years without a single call from my parents. No messages, no emails, no apologies. They had completely erased me from their lives, and I did the same. I didn't need them anymore. My life now was filled with work, new friends, and Aunt Margaret, the one who had always stood by me through the toughest times. I had built a life they no longer had any control over, a life I deserved. But I didn't know the nightmare with my family wasn't over. Because on one fateful day, Lauren returned, with a defeated face and eyes full of despair. And that's when everything changed. 3 years without a single word from them, 3 years without an apology, and I had gotten used to it. I no longer woke up each morning wondering if my parents missed me. I no longer felt a sting in my chest when I saw other families gathered together. I had built a new life, a solid career, and a future where I didn't have to bow down to anyone. Until Lauren showed up. I had just finished an important meeting on Saturday afternoon when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it was a neighbor or a delivery person, but when I opened the door, I almost didn't recognize her. Lauren stood there, worn out, hair messily tied up, deep dark circles under her eyes, the once expensive coat now worn and faded. Gone was the glamorous golden child of the past. "We need to talk." Her voice was hoarse, as if she hadn't slept in days. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "Well, this is a surprise. I thought you'd forgotten I even existed." Lauren pressed her lips together, silent. She no longer had that arrogant attitude she once wore so well. Finally, she took a deep breath, her eyes filled with confusion. "Mom and Dad, they're in serious trouble. The restaurant is on the brink of bankruptcy. They need your help." I almost laughed. They needed my help. The same people who had thrown me out without hesitation were now standing at the edge of ruin and turning to me. "Help?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean after 3 years of cutting me off, suddenly I matter enough to save the family?" Lauren lowered her head, something I'd never seen her do before. "Elizabeth, I know what happened was a mistake, but we're still family, and you can save them." "Why should I?" I was cold as ice. Lauren began to explain. "After I left, my parents poured everything they had into expanding the restaurant chain. They took out loans to build more locations, expanded the menu, but the market had changed. Operating costs skyrocketed while customer traffic kept dropping. Then the pandemic hit. The loans turned into a mountain of debt. The restaurants that were once their pride became a heavy burden. Employees quit, suppliers demanded payment, and locations started closing one by one. My father talked about bankruptcy. My mother fell apart. And Lauren, the one who had been their hope, the one they favored without hesitation, had failed to turn things around. Now they needed me. I listened to the whole story, feeling hollow inside. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Satisfaction that justice had finally arrived. Resentment that they only came to me when there was nowhere else to turn. Or was it pain? Because no matter what, they were still my family. Lauren looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Elizabeth, you have an MBA. You're working with top companies. If anyone can save the restaurant, it's you." I stayed silent. Part of me wanted to slam this door shut immediately. I had spent 3 years building a new life, finally free from their shadow, and now I was supposed to go back just to patch up the mess they created themselves? But I couldn't stop that small voice in my head. If I helped them, could things be different? Could this be the chance for them to finally see my worth? Could I stop being the forgotten child? I looked at Lauren for a long time. She was waiting, anxious, hoping for a glimmer of mercy. But I couldn't decide right then. "I need time to think." Lauren nodded, disappointed, but didn't argue. Before leaving, she hesitated and said, "Whatever you decide, I'm sorry." But 3 years of pain couldn't be erased with just 2 words. I had changed, and this time, the decision would be mine. I thought I had time to think. I thought I could weigh the pros and cons, figure out whether or not I should help them. But I forgot one thing. When people are desperate, they don't weigh. They barge in, they demand, they crush whatever reason you have left. They didn't send an email, they didn't call, they came straight to my office. I was in a meeting with a client when my assistant, Natalie, poked her head into the room, looking awkward. "Elizabeth, there are 2 people waiting for you in the lobby. They say they're your parents." I felt my whole body freeze. Every moment from the past 3 years came crashing back like a violent storm. That night, I was kicked out. Lauren's smug face, the false accusations, my father's cold eyes as he told me to get out of this house. Now. And now they were here? I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Tell them I'm busy." Natalie hesitated. "They said they'll wait, and they're drawing attention. If you don't come down, they might cause a scene." I clenched my jaw. I wasn't that scared, fragile girl anymore, but I also couldn't let them disrupt my workplace. I walked down to the lobby and saw them immediately. My parents looked wrecked. My father, who was always neatly dressed, now looked like he had aged 10 years. His graying hair was messy, his face gaunt, his eyes tired. My mother sat on one of the waiting chairs, her hands clenched together, her dress wrinkled and missing the elegance she used to pride herself on. I said nothing. They came to find me. They were the ones who needed to speak first. My mother broke the silence. "Elizabeth, sweetheart, we need to talk." "Sweetheart?" I let out a cold laugh. 3 years ago, they didn't hesitate to throw me out. Now they were using sweet words like nothing had ever happened. "About what?" I crossed my arms, my voice devoid of emotion. My father cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. We were wrong, Elizabeth. We shouldn't have treated you that way. We let our emotions cloud our judgment, but, I raised an eyebrow. My mother lowered her head, her voice trembling. "We really need your help." Here it was the real reason. I leaned against the wall behind me, waiting for them to continue. "The restaurant isn't just going bankrupt," my father said, his voice lower. We've run into some legal issues." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Legal issues?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" My father bit his lip while my mother was on the verge of tears. "We're under investigation for tax evasion. Some of the loans also had irregularities, and—" He hesitated. "And," I repeated, my voice colder this time, "if it's not resolved soon, we could face criminal charges." That sentence hit like a bomb. Tax evasion, financial violations, risk of prosecution. I took a deep breath. This wasn't just a mistake. They had gone too far. My mother quickly reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled back as if burned. "Elizabeth, you can save us. You're smart. You can figure something out. You can help us avoid this." I laughed, but there was no joy in it. "And why would I do that?" My father's expression hardened. "Because we're family." I felt something inside me snap, like an invisible thread breaking. 3 years ago, they took everything from me, cast me out like a stranger, and now, staring down the barrel of total collapse, they suddenly remembered I was family. Family? I repeated the word as if testing whether it still held any meaning for me. And the answer was no. My family wasn't the people who abandoned me. My family was the one who always believed in me, lifted me up, gave me a chance when no one else would. My family is Aunt Margaret. I looked at them for a long time. 3 years ago, I would have done anything to earn their approval, but now I realized something important. Ellie, I didn't need them anymore. I slowly shook my head. Ugh. My mother burst into tears. "Elizabeth, please, we'll lose everything." I looked at her, but there was no pity left in me. "That's the price you have to pay for the choices you made." Then I turned away, leaving them behind. This time, I was the one making the decision. And I chose myself. I walked away, leaving my parents collapsed on the lobby chairs. They had lost everything: reputation, money, future. But I couldn't care anymore, because I was no longer their puppet. But the story didn't end there. I wanted to believe that refusing to help them was enough, that I could return to my life without looking back, but I knew all too well. People like my parents never give up until they've drained every last thing they can cling to. And I was right. The desperate plea. 2 days after the meeting at my office, they came to my home. I had just gotten back from work when I saw my parents standing outside my apartment door. Their faces looked even more exhausted, like they hadn't slept in days. "Elizabeth, please, just hear us out," my mother begged. I crossed my arms. I'd heard enough. "We could lose everything," she cried. "We might go to court. We could end up in jail. Do you really want to see your parents go through that?" I took a deep breath and stared at them. 3 years ago, when you threw me out, did either of you think about how I would survive? My mother was silent, her eyes red and swollen. My father, as always, tried to take control. "We can fix this together. You're smart. You can come up with a plan, find a way to save the family." "No," I said firmly. "There's nothing left to save." They couldn't understand. They thought I was just being bitter, that I would eventually give in if they begged enough. But what they didn't know was that I no longer held anger toward them. I simply didn't care. Sweetheart, please help us, my mother tried again, but I shook my head. You should get a lawyer. I'm not helping you avoid the consequences. I didn't give them a chance to say anything else. I turned and walked inside, slamming the door shut behind me, cutting off all their pleas. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. I had refused to help them, but what did that really mean? Their wrongdoing didn't just affect them. The restaurant owed wages to employees, debts to suppliers, and had evaded hundreds of thousands in taxes. If I stayed silent, innocent people would continue to suffer while my parents would try to escape responsibility like they always had. I picked up the phone and dialed the one number I knew would give me the right answer. Yeah, Margaret, I knew you'd call. Her voice was calm but steady. I took a deep breath. What do you think I should do? She didn't hesitate. You already know the answer. The only question is whether you're brave enough to do what's right. I closed my eyes. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I sent an email to the IRS reporting all the information about my parents' tax evasion. I also contacted the Department of Labor about their failure to pay employees and filed a complaint with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network regarding their illegal loans. I didn't do this out of revenge. I did it because I wasn't going to let them continue hurting other people. Everything happened faster than I expected. 2 weeks later, the restaurant was shut down. Their bank accounts were frozen for investigation, suppliers sued them for unpaid debts, the IRS officially launched an investigation, and my parents faced fines of hundreds of thousands of dollars. It didn't stop there. The investigation expanded to include illegal contracts they had signed, falsified financial documents, loans with signs of fraud. Everything came to light. There was no way out. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Lauren's number. I hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. What did you do? Her voice was filled with rage. What someone should have done a long time ago, I replied calmly. You destroyed our family. I let out a cold laugh. Family? No, you and our parents destroyed yourselves. I just made sure they were held accountable for what they did. You're a monster. No, I said slowly. I'm just the only one who's no longer being manipulated. I hung up. I didn't need to hear another word. 3 years ago, they kicked me out, made me feel like I was nothing. Now, I had closed the last door between me and them with my own hands. No more chains, no more burden, nothing tying me to them anymore. I was finally free. I set the phone down, staring at the dark screen. Lauren could call me a monster, but I didn't care. I wasn't the Elizabeth from 3 years ago anymore. Over the years, I had walked a path they never believed I could. I had shed the painful past and built a future with my own hands, one that didn't need validation from anyone. And now I was moving forward. My company was preparing for a major project, a multi-million-dollar contract that, if successful, could earn me a promotion to director. 2 years ago, I was just a new hire, working hard, trying to prove myself. But now, I was one of the best in the firm. I was no longer the girl constantly compared to Lauren. I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I was Elizabeth Carter, a top financial consultant. I attended meetings with senior executives, presenting strategies I had spent hundreds of hours developing. I realized that here, people respected me for my abilities, not for my last name. And then, on a Monday morning, as I was making coffee in the office, the CEO walked into the meeting room and looked directly at me. Elizabeth, get ready, the board wants to discuss promoting you. I nodded, trying to keep a calm expression, but inside me there was a feeling I hadn't felt in a very long time. Victory. That evening, I visited Aunt Margaret. She was standing in the kitchen, stirring a fragrant pot of soup, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. I have some good news to share with you, I said, setting down my bag and pulling out a chair to sit across from her. She smiled, setting the spoon down. Is it about work? I nodded, the corners of my mouth lifting with pride. They're considering promoting me. If everything goes well, I'll become a director this year. Aunt Margaret beamed, her eyes filled with genuine joy. You deserve it, Elizabeth. I felt a wave of warmth spread through my chest. She wasn't jealous. She didn't look down on me. She was proud of me. We had dinner together, talking about work, life, and plans for the future. I no longer felt empty. I no longer felt alone. Because I had a family, a real one. After everything that happened, I began spending more time on myself. I learned to enjoy a quiet morning with a hot cup of coffee instead of rushing into work. I started practicing yoga, reading more, traveling with the people I loved. I had learned to live for myself. Sometimes memories of my old family would still come back. I couldn't erase the past, but it no longer had control over me. They had disappeared from my life, and I no longer felt pain because of it. One day, as I was on my way home, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I didn't have to guess, I knew who it was. I hesitated for a second, then declined the call. There was nothing left to say. I had chosen my own life. No more manipulation, no more pain. Only a bright future waiting ahead of me. Elizabeth's story isn't just a journey from pain to success. It's clear proof that real family isn't defined by blood, but by love and respect. Sometimes, to find happiness, we must have the courage to let go of toxic relationships, no matter how deep the bond may seem. No one has the right to control you just because they call themselves family. The greatest success isn't revenge, it's living a happy, free life, under no one's control.